Hello, I'm Maria from Sew Local Stitch Lounge, and I'm going to show you how to make two little snack bags, reusable snack bags. They are lined with food-safe plastic. They've got Velcro closures and a handy little bowl or plate cover or hat. So here are the supplies we'll be using today. I have 2 pieces of quilting cotton that we're going to use to make the bowl cover, and then there's 2 other pieces of quilting cotton. The smaller one is going to be for the mini snack bag, and there's a piece of food safe plastic for the inside of that. And then for the larger snack bag, we're going to be using this right here. You also have cord elastic, some thread, and a piece of Velcro. These are the tools we're going to be using to make the 2 projects. We've got a rotary cutter, glue stick, awl, and a bodkin. That's for pulling the elastic through. Okay, so I'm going to be making the medium-sized baggie in the video, and you'll follow all the same steps with smaller dimensions for making the mini baggie. We're going to be cutting the fabric and the food-safe plastic to be a 9-inch square for this one. And it is highly recommended that you wash your fabric. I didn't follow my own recommendations because I forgot. So I'm not washing this, but I know that when I wash it, this is gonna shrink down, but the plastic is not gonna shrink down, so it's gonna be a little bit bunchy. That's okay. But I do recommend, if you remember, if you have time, wash your fabric first, and then iron it, and then you can cut it. A 9x9 square, and I'm going to cut this down. I am just shy of getting a full 9, but that's okay. And now we're going to cut the Velcro in half lengthwise. So we'll be using half of it for the mini and half of it for the medium. Now whenever you're using the plastic, you will not be using pins. So that's why you need the clips, because the pins will leave a hole and they aren't going away. So make sure to iron your fabric first, because this is your last chance to ever iron this fabric, because it's going to be attached to the plastic in a minute. I need to do some ironing, is that okay? I'll just use it right here. Thank you. I'm going to place 1 piece of plastic on each piece of fabric, and then I'm going to put clips, and I'm going to do clips around all the sides because the plastic tends to slide around a lot, so this will help to hold it. The plastic is very slightly smaller than the fabric, and that's okay. It's still going to be caught in the seam, so. So I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to sew along the top edge with a 1/4-inch seam allowance, just running right down there. Smooth. Okay, I can do it better. There. Okay, I'm ready to sew. We're going to do a 1/4-inch seam allowance, and I've tested this out a couple of different ways with the plastic on top and the plastic underneath. Both of them work great. I didn't have any problems with the plastic getting torn at all. The only time I did have that problem was when I used a walking foot. So I do not recommend a walking foot. It tended to, the teeth of the walking foot were kind of like just grabbing the plastic, and it was a little bit too rough for it. So this, my regular sewing foot worked just great. Now, when I'm sewing, I try not to do this very much where you're pulling on both edges of your seam. But with the plastic, I find that it helps get you a little bit more control. So I'm holding onto the back and the front and just giving it a little tug because the plastic does tend to slide or move a little bit. The other thing you can do is use an awl to hold down the plastic while you sew up to it. And we'll be doing that more probably in other seams. So we've got both of those seams sewn. We're gonna open that, and at this point I would press the seam open, but we're not gonna do that because it's plastic and it will melt. So I'm just gonna kind of open it with my fingers and then fold the plastic against the wrong side here. And just play with that seam because you want the seam to be up to the edge like this. And I'll put a couple of clips at the edges to keep it like that. And also a couple down in the bottom corners. So I'm going to take apart the Velcro, and when I place it down, I want to put, so the side that the finished edge of the Velcro, that was like the factory edge, we're going to put that on the top so that it's aligned with the seam. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that it gives you something to grab when you're trying to open the Velcro bag at the end, and it looks a little bit nicer. So you'll see that one the most. So I'm going to just put this here. Try to keep the edge of the Velcro aligned with the edge of that seam. You could try using glue on this actually. That's might be a good idea. A couple spots. We'll find out how well it sticks. So now we're going to do 2 rows of stitching. We won't be sewing up the short ends of the Velcro. We're just going to start at the end here and sew straight across, and then again in the lower spot right across. I increased my stitch length a little bit. It's at 2.6 now, and that's just, it'll be a little bit easier to get over the Velcro, especially the hook Velcro. The hook side is a little bit harder to sew with. The one, I didn't even bother back stitching because that's going to be secured later. Same thing across the bottom half of the Velcro. So I've had in the past, I've had problems sewing the Velcro because the thread sometimes gets shredded or cut with the Velcro just because it's so stiff, I guess. So just if that happens, just try again. The thread should be okay because it's the polyester thread, so it's pretty strong. You could try using a different needle if you're having problems with it, but usually it's not too bad. Okay, so I've got both of the sides of the bag made with Velcro on the top, and we're gonna put them right sides together with the plastic out. Line up your top edge. We won't be sewing there, but I just wanted to secure it. And for this seam, I'm going to be using the awl. So we're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the reason I have the awl is because the top layer of the food safe plastic tends to want to move forward faster than the other fabrics. So I'm going to if I need to, I'll hold it down with the awl and make a little tuck in the plastic just to, it's gonna be inside and it won't be noticeable, but just to keep it from shifting too far. So you can see where I held it down with the awl and it made it just a tiny little pucker, which won't be noticeable. It'll be inside. Okay, so now we're gonna trim down the seam allowance because we're basically doing a French seam, but it's gonna be an exposed French seam on the outside of the bag. So we're gonna trim down the seam allowance, and a lot of people ask me, why not just make a smaller seam to start with? What's the point of trimming down your seam? And the reason is that things move around and shift, and your seam allowance isn't always perfect. You know, mine isn't, so it just allows you to make it really nice and tidy and get rid of any little loose threads or things that are sticking out. But we want it to be about 1/8 of an inch. You could use a rotary cutter for this as well if you want. Now we're going to turn it right side out. You want to poke out your corners. If you do this with a tool, just be really careful because you don't want to put a hole in the plastic. We want those seams to be out to the edge for this next part. We'll close up the Velcro. And the last thing to do is to do an outside seam, and that's gonna conceal the inside seam that we just made, make it stronger, and just keep it nice and tidy and make it look cute. So this will be about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, just down, across, and back up. I'm gonna make my stitch length just a little longer for this one. I'll bring it up to 3. Don't you get stuck. So there, I've got both the medium size and the mini. I'm putting pretzels in this one. Feels so good. Okay, so now we're gonna make the bowl cover, and I wanna make it as big as I can with the fabric that I have. So what I'm going to do, this piece is the one with the biggest selvage, so I'm going to just fold the fabric up so that I'm barely covering the selvage, just because I know that part will be, some of it's going to be used in seam allowance, but I don't want too much of it showing. And then I'm going to measure how much room I have here, and it comes up to 7 inches. And this is folded in 4. So this is going to be an easy way to make a little circle. I'm going to keep it right here. I'm going to grab a ruler, and I'm going to put the 7 on my point and do a little dot. That's how far it gets. And I'm going to just keep doing that. Okay, so that's good enough. Then I'm going to cut this. There's a circle. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this piece. And rather than doing all the measuring, I'm just going to use this as my pattern. And I have just a little bit of the selvage in it, but that's fine. It's gonna be hidden in the seam allowance. So now I'll put both fabrics right sides together like this. And for this we can pin. So we're going to sew around this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we'll leave an opening. I'm just going to mark it for myself. I want it to be a couple inches, just big enough to turn. I don't want it to be too big because then it makes it harder to sew up after. But too small makes it almost impossible to flip. So I'm going to be sewing all the way around, 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving a little gap. So I'm going to turn it right side out, but first I am going to just trim the seam allowance down a little bit. I will not trim between the marks because that's just making it hard to sew it up. And I don't want to trim too much, but it's going to look flatter if there's a tiny seam allowance. It's going to look better. So I'm going to bring it down to about 1/8. Okay, so to turn this right side out, I find the easiest way is to start opposite of your opening and try to push a little that end out like this so that you have something to grab onto. Now we'll spend some time with the iron. I want that seam right to the edge, so I have my little stick. I'm gonna just try to push that out. I want to tuck that edge in and try to make it as nice and round as possible so that it just blends in with the rest of the circle. I need to find the opening. I guess I did a pretty good job because I can't see it. Okay, so I'm gonna top stitch around the whole circle. I'll close up some of this opening, but leave just enough space so that I can fit a bodkin through. We'll finish it at the end. So we're going to be top stitching around about 1/8 from the edge. Now we need to do another line of stitching to create a channel for the elastic, and I'm going to give it about 1/2 inch. This time we don't need to leave an opening, so you're going all the way around. I'm just kind of taking a guess. I'm going to leave that much space between my foot and the stitching. So I have a piece of elastic. It's pretty strong, 1/8 inch round cord elastic, and I have way more than we're going to use, but that's okay. I'm going to attach the bodkin to the end of it, and I really like this bodkin because it works well in small spaces because it pulls it straight off the end of the bodkin rather than having to loop through like a lot of bodkins, traditional bodkins. Bodkin's such a good word. Just say it. Bodkin. Okay. Go in the hole. feel like I just made a shower cap. It's extremely cute. Okay. Okay, so this is where I want it to land. I'm gonna clip these two together. Try to get them to stay like that. And I'm not even gonna cut down the elastic yet because I'm gonna cut it after I'm done sewing it together. I just wanna, that didn't stay. I just wanna get some more elastic to make this easier. And I need to sew these together. I think the easiest way to do that is to do a zigzag stitch over top of the both of them. So we're gonna attempt this. I'll go with a pretty wide one to start. Oh, she doesn't like it. Make it a little wider so I can go right around. That's better. Although we do need to stab the elastic a little bit with the needle, otherwise you could just pull them right out if it's not actually catching any of the elastic. So I will bring it back. Okay, that was longer than I thought. But it's all gonna hide in the bowl and I think it's gonna be pretty secure. That's good. Slide you back in. Now I gotta try to sew this up.
You're just gonna try?
I'm gonna try. There's room, I fit. The machine just fits beside the elastic, but you could always move your needle over if you're having problems with it. Closed it hot. It fits. It would probably even fit a bigger bowl. So that's really cute. Yes, I did.